right, so here we are, another episode of Always Say Yes to Adventure, interviews with martial artists in the Bond community. So we're sitting here with John Abel, right?
Correct, yep.
And I stumbled upon you from an article that you did for the 007 website, the 007 GB website, right? What was the
Yeah,
title?
fighting style of Fleming's Bond. I think the
The
editor
fighting
actually,
style of Fleming's Bond, yeah.
yeah. To be fair, I think the editor actually amended that because that wasn't my original title. So I think he did a bit of magic on that for
What
me.
was the original title?
I can't remember. First difficult question. Thanks, Alex.
All right. However, it struck me. I was immediately like pulled in. I read the article, devoured it, absolutely loved it. And my first thought was I was kind of a little pissed because I didn't think of it myself. I was like, damn it, you beat me to the punch. This is and it really sucked because it was good. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy knows what he's talking about. He's definitely a seasoned martial artist. So I was like, so the first thing I did was reach out to David Lobergelli and said, who is this guy? I can't find him on Facebook or Instagram. I gotta talk to him immediately because this article is amazing. I loved it. So, okay, so let's start from the beginning. What inspired you to write it? What were you thinking of doing, and how did you come about it? So just tell me about the article itself.
So I think where I've been doing martial arts for a long time, and the priority for me has always been self-defense. And what comes from that is a lot of cross training. I find most traditional styles or most styles have some gaps, and it's not a negative on any particular style. It's just in terms of dealing with any kind of situation, I find cross training, you need to kind of round out the skills a little bit. So I've always been passionate about cross training and finding interesting combinations of martial arts. And even so, I think a lot of people think, well, if I do grappling, I need to do striking. Well, actually, doing more than one striking martial art can really add to what you already know and what you already do. And again, it all comes back to, is it David always says, what's the why? And again, it's kind of, what's your motivation? Is it competition? Is it tournaments? Is it self-defense? And it's really your cross training depending on what it is you're trying to improve. For me, it was self-defense. And I think that's why I was so passionate about Fleming's style, because he references a lot of boxing and judo. So I was really passionate about that because for me, it not only was it a realistic art for James Bond's character back in the day, but even today it still holds up from a self-defense point of view. It really holds up today as an effective, efficient combination of martial arts. So that's, I think I've always been passionate about those combinations and cross training and finding what works and what's effective. So I think that was there. When I joined the club, seeing that other members could add articles and have their say, and actually, I really appreciate the compliments at the start. But in part, it was your article about martial arts that made me think, okay, I could do my own thing with this. I could put my own spin on it. So I was certainly inspired by yourself there as well.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to inspire. I mean, I always want to inspire other people to do things like that, to reach out and to see what they can, do on their own.
And can I just say, most people in martial arts, there's quite often a little bit of ego. Sometimes people are very guarded about what they do. Then they're quite often not very open to talking to other people, listening to other viewpoints. Me and you have exchanged a couple of emails, and you were like, "Hey, do you want to come on and have a chat?" And I think that can be quite rare in the martial arts community. So I just want to say, hats off to you. I really, I think that's great that you can be so open and just chat to other people. And I think that's really good because I don't think you always come across that. Might be different on your side of the pond.
Yeah. Well, no, it's pretty much very similar here. And again, trust me, I've come up against plenty of egos in the martial arts over the past few decades, so I'm no stranger to that. I don't want to be that, you know, and I don't think martial arts should be that. And I don't think martial artists should be that way. We should be open. We should be communicating. We should be reaching out to each other and exchanging ideas. One of the things that our grandmaster and my Sifu always tried to get through to us is that, you know, what's like I do a martial art called Fujapai, Tiger Claw. Big history, lots of, you know, accolades and whatnot, including him. But he would always say, you know, what's the difference between Fujao and every other martial art? And when everybody would be racking, coming up with all these technical answers, and he just said, he was like, nothing. You're the difference. All the martial arts are basically the same. You make the difference. You know, he would always say, Fujao Pai is not going to make you great. You're going to make Fujao Pai great. You make the difference. You know, and it's true. I mean, essentially, you know, there's three or four martial arts. There's kickboxing, there's grappling, and there's wrestling. So there's really only three ways to fight. Every martial art is going to be some combination of one of those three things, or two of those three things, or maybe three of those three things in different degrees, right? So
The body mechanics are the same, no matter the style.
yeah,
The body mechanics are the same. You can only move certain ways,
yeah,
so you're
yeah.
going to find a lot of similarities. Absolutely.
Yes. So you get these martial arts, well, this is good and that's bad. And you know, I see a lot of videos that say Kung Fu is terrible. And I'm like, no, Kung Fu is just as good as anything. It's the person, it's the individual. How do they apply it? How do they take the knowledge they know and put it into practical use? When I read your article, I could definitely see that you're coming from that perspective. What were the Bond, not you, you're coming from the Bond novel now, the Bond novels that you were really, not so much the movies, but you're coming at it through Ian Fleming's Bond. So what novels did you sort of think about when you were writing this?
So this is interesting actually because so the first novel I ever read in my early 20s was Sebastian Faulk's Devil May Care.
Oh, so it wasn't even Ian Fleming.
Easy thing where I hold it up.
Yeah.
So that was the first book I read. So Casino Royale came out 2005. This book came out in around 2008. So I was, you know, I'd been a Bond fan before that. But because I come from a jiu-jitsu background, traditional Japanese style of jiu-jitsu, when Casino Royale came out, it was really exciting because we've moved past Pierce Brosnan's one-punch knockouts, and now we're seeing real techniques. I mean, even in the credits of Casino Royale, you get two techniques, which is something I did every week. So it was really exciting to see that change. So I was you know really into it, like we all were once Casino came out. And I read this book. This book came out a few years after, and I think I was on a bit of a Bond holiday at the time, actually, on a trip doing kayaking, hiking, biking, so proper adventure Bond holiday. And I read this book, and it stuck with me ever since because the start of the book, he's actually between missions. I think he's in Barbados doing his thing for a few weeks, but it talks a lot about his daily routine, and was really interesting because just to sort of stay match fit, he was going for 3 mile runs every day. He was doing pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, just general exercise. And then also he was doing, when he was taking a shower, he'd do scalding hot and then he'd finish the shower freezing cold. And even now, you look at people like Dana White's talking about cold plunging and all the health benefits of these things. And back in, you know, I was reading back in 2008 that James Bond was, you know, doing the cold shower and all the benefits that come from that. So it was a very accessible book. It was very much Sean Connery era written, you know, it was very accessible for me at the time, and I really enjoyed it. But it was just those moments about him in Barbados chilling out. A lot of the things that we look at, you know, on David's videos and a lot of these travel videos. But so I think the original references for me about the boxing and judo, I believe, are in that book. Now, I've not fully read it. I started it again the other day just for this interview, but I believe that that's where I originally read the boxing and the judo. Now, I knew before I wrote the article, I did a bit of research into Ian Fleming's novels, and I knew that he referenced that as well. But I think that combination had stuck with me since 2008, since reading this book. So it's always been in the back of my mind. So it's really stuck with me. But in terms of Fleming novels, I've read Dr. No, From Russia with Love. I've read all the short stories, which are just brilliant, just not what you would expect. I think Dr. No, looking back at Dr. No, once you've seen all the movies and you've read the other books, it feels a bit like By the Numbers, because you've seen it all already. And I know
Yeah.
when it first came out, it was brand new.
Mm-hmm.
But then you read From Russia with Love, and it just, Bond doesn't even turn up in it for half the book, and it's just mind blowing. Brilliant writing, just not quite what you'd expect. But you got me onto Goldfinger, which I started the other day. Straight away, there's a little bit of
I was about
martial
to
arts in there.
mention, yeah, Goldfinger, because he goes a lot more into the martial arts in Goldfinger.
Yeah, so you told me that, and I started it within the first chapter. I think he's like I think he's sat on a plane or something. He's massaging the edge of his hand where he's been using his blade edge strikes.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a little bit of description where somebody comes at him with a upward thrust with a stab. He does a
Mm-hmm.
forearm block.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's written straight out of a self-defense manual from
Mm-hmm.
from World War II. I mean, like you say, the detail there, I was
Mm-hmm.
really surprised at, and I don't remember that from Dr. No or From Russia with Love, really, that level of detail. So that was really interesting. And when he does the parry, then it says he opened up the attacker, opened up his guard for what he called a chin jab.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know whether you picked up on that, because you've probably got something similar in your style. For me, I just read it as a jab to the chin. But when I started looking at some of the Fairbairn World War II stuff that they were teaching in Britain, and if you can just search it on YouTube, but a chin jab was actually a palm strike under the chin and driving the head backwards,
Yeah.
driving head back, so the balance is going over the heels.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was a funny way to write it, the way he wrote opened him up for a chin jab.
Yeah.
But then
Because
when
we're
you look
thinking jab.
I just thought jab to the chin, sure. But then actually, it's this technique that they were teaching in World War II, which would have been something that Bond's character or Fleming would have been aware of,
Yeah.
because it was very very standard technique. But it's the same technique that they use, and you probably would have seen it also in judo. But instead of the chin, they use the lapel. They drive up with the lapel.
Yeah.
Called osotogari. So they
Yeah.
drive up the lapel instead of the chin. But it's
Learning
exactly
that now.
I was going to ask, how's that going? Because I saw in your other video you're getting back into judo.
Yeah, I had to take a little break because of from coming back from scuba diving. I got a little eye injury, so I have to take a little break, but I'll get back into it as soon as I can. As a person who's almost 60, I don't know how wise a choice I made though.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot
But
of
we'll
heavy
see.
landings. A lot of
What?
heavy landings.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but yeah, so yeah, and if you go further into Goldfinger, he does go even more into it, especially when he starts describing Oddjob, who's karate
Mm.
practitioner. And then he's also writing a manual on empty hand fighting techniques for the Secret Service.
Yeah,
So
I read that he'd sort of started that. So
yeah,
does he go more into detail with that, or?
a little bit, yeah, a little bit. It's just there's so many of these little passages in there where it just clued me in that Fleming definitely had some martial arts training. There is
Mm.
no way he could have written with that level of detail and not taken at least a few classes. So, it was remarkable. And then when I did some research, the karate system of Wei Chi Ru, they claim that Fleming was in their classes. So,
But it makes sense though, right? Because if you
oh,
don't know
totally,
about martial arts, you can't
absolutely.
you can't write like that. Absolutely.
Especially at that time because it wasn't very popular. It was just you were really just at the beginning of Western, when with the soldiers coming back from Asia, you're just having just the beginning of Westerners being exposed to any type of Asian martial arts whatsoever. So for Fleming in the 50s, it wasn't common at all. It was very uncommon. you know, for anybody to know anything about, you know, karate or taekwondo or especially kung fu. So,
Absolutely. Well, it's funny you say that. And I wanted to talk to you about this actually because the guy I mentioned earlier, Fairburn, he so he taught a lot of the special operatives for World War II, a lot of the British guys. So I think this would have been a stuff that Fleming would have seen.
mhm,
Um, but he was in the military. Then he was a police officer in China or Hong Kong. So this is what I wanted to talk to you about because he learned a lot of his stuff from Chinese martial artists over there while he was over there. He also studied some jujitsu, which is what he brought back. So if you look at the Fairburn system, and I found a video yesterday which was called Fairburn and the Chinese Connection, and some of the
mm,
strikes he uses are the Tiger Claw strike. And I was
mhm.
thinking of you, and I was thinking, what a brilliant connection for you as being your style, your bread and butter. And actually, you've got a bit of a connection there to bond because this technique was given to British soldiers, special
Interesting.
operatives in World War II. So the technique we were talking about earlier with driving the chin up,
Mhm.
there's a picture of Fairburn tiger claw on the face after he's
Oh,
driven the
wow.
chin, but also using it as strikes. So raking at the eyes. So obviously you're going for the strike with the
Yeah,
bottom of the bony
yeah,
part of
yeah,
the palm, obviously, for your viewers, and then raking at the eye. So it's quite a distraction to then move in. So he was using that. So and he would have learned that in China from his
yeah.
time in China. And I
Oh,
was
yeah.
thinking of you, and I was thinking, what a brilliant connection for you to have there. But he also brought back jujitsu. So we had that a long time ago. But there's another
And
style.
let's differentiate Japanese traditional
Oh,
jujitsu, not Brazilian, right?
yeah, I don't think there was too much Brazilian jiu-jitsu back
Because
then.
they're really two different things.
I think it's derived from traditional Japanese martial arts. So if you look at judo, aikido,
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu, they all use a lot of the same
Yeah,
locks.
yeah. No, yeah, definitely. But you know, as Brazilian jiu-jitsu is like 99% on the ground.
They do seem to emphasize, and I think it
Yeah,
depends on the club and the instructors, but a lot of the
yeah,
emphasis is on the ground, which
yeah,
is why from a bond and a self-defense point of view, which that's why I think judo is so good because it's
yeah,
stand-up grappling, throwing
yeah.
people that don't want to be thrown.
Yeah.
Whereas,
It
as you
starts
say,
up with two people standing and then grabbing each other into grappling, and then from the grappling into wrestling. You know,
absolutely,
traditional judo. Yeah,
and it's got the groundwork as well.
and it's
Um,
got the
So
groundwork
it,
as
so it
well.
co- covers all those skills. It's got the chokes, the strangles, the
Yeah,
locks,
yeah,
everything. I mean, that's why. So Sean Connery obviously had some sort of judo background, I believe, and some of the techniques in those earlier films where he's throwing people by the arm and by the wrist,
mm,
and he's using those techniques there.
yeah,
And I came across a book yesterday on a Blackman's self-defense because she
yeah.
was like a black belt in judo, right?
She
And there were
was.
books going on eBay at the moment for her self-defense book, which looks
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Yeah, very interesting that she was I mean, she started in the when she was in the Avengers, and the original stunt coordinators were judo black belts, and they trained her, and she just loved it and just kept on going with it. Unlike Diana Rigg, who started learning kung fu, and once the Avengers was over, she did a tiny little bit you see in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and then she just that was it. That was the end of it. She never really took it any further. However, and I said this before, she is in the Guinness Book of World Record as the first Westerner to ever demonstrate Chinese kung fu on Western TV 2 years before Bruce Lee.
That's incredible, isn't it? When you think about it, that
Isn't
is
that
crazy.
weird?
Do you mind if I ask you? So you'd tried a few different martial arts. You've got a bit of experience in other arts yourself.
Yeah.
What drew you to what you have essentially stayed with for you know the one that you've chosen for life, really?
Oh, okay. I don't want to make it too long a story because we're here for you, not
Sure.
me. But for whatever reason, I always wanted to do Chinese Kung Fu. Probably influenced. There was a TV show in the 70s with a guy named David Carradine called Kung Fu. took
Sure.
place part in the Shaolin Temple when he's a kid, and then he's wandering around the West. And the martial arts they display in there is Tai Chi. I actually met David Carradine's Sifu, who taught him. He's a Tai Chi master. Tai Chi is a form of Kung Fu, but it's, it's Tai Chi. But I don't know. Since I was a little kid, I wanted Chinese martial art. Now, as I got a little older, part of the reason was because there was two aspects to it that didn't exist in other martial arts. One, Chinese martial arts are based in Chinese medicine. Two,
Are we
two,
live? Are we
it's
live?
just if you do a gesture, that happens. Two, the meditative aspect. I really wanted the meditative aspect. Now, again, I've gone into this in other videos that I had dealt with anxiety my whole life, and doing meditation was a way of dealing with anxiety. So I really needed that meditative aspect. And 50% of Kung Fu, almost all Kung Fu's 50% is sitting meditation. So if you're going to really truly understand Chinese Kung Fu and to practice it, half of what you do has to be meditation. And that really intrigued me. And the more I learned that and the more I got into that, the more I wanted to get into it. And I think that more than anything was why I gravitated more to the Chinese martial art. Because I had done judo when I was a kid, loved it. I had done taekwondo as a young kid when I was like around 12. Again, I'm sorry I didn't continue. I wish I did. My kicks would be spectacular right now if I did. Much better than they are now. I did Shotokan karate in college, and again, enjoyed it, but there was always that little
Mm.
something that was great, but not quite. And nothing against those arts. I loved them. They were great, but it was like I needed something extra. And then when I found, and I did a few different Kung Fu schools around where I lived. And it was like, not quite, stay away from that place. That's weird. But then when I found my Sifu Shuyu Quan, I just knew this was the guy, this was the place. I walked in and I felt like I found a home. And I was like, this is where I got to stay. And it was like I was there 5, 6 days a week for the next 4 years. So, and then I dialed it down to 4 days a week and then 3 days a week. And pretty much been practicing 3 to 4 days a week every day since. So that's my story real quick. How about you? What was your story? What led you to the martial arts?
So interesting. Well, it's just interesting you touched up on the meditation side of it, because even when I was doing a kids karate class, really young age, and at the time I didn't think anything of it, but at the end of every class they would make us kneel down, close our eyes, work on our breathing, and I had
Wow.
other experiences with meditation and things later on, in other things, but it was kind of like, it was that light bulb moment that even as a young kid we were exposed to that. And I think that that's really good. And even so, my son, he even at primary school they've started introducing things like yoga and relaxation and some meditation type things. And I think what a brilliant thing to do is bring it in from a young early age. And I think back to that as being my first experience with that, learning to breathe, and how important that is, especially today when we're stuck in a room or stuck in an office. Or so yeah. But sorry. So my main style of martial art is traditional jiu-jitsu. I've done a lot of striking on the side in different martial arts. Tend to be fairly short-lived, just bits and pieces I've managed to cross-training.
Like
When I
what?
first Thai boxing, kickboxing, a bit Wing Chun, Taekwondo. I think when you train martial arts, you meet other people that have done things, you go and do other classes. But I was missing that element of sparring, real pressure testing, which I don't get in jiu-jitsu, because unlike judo, yeah, so unlike judo, we do techniques from a punch, more from an attack or a punch or a kick, which has its pros and cons. It means we learn how to deal with a punch to the face, whereas in judo, you might not pick that up. However,
Mm.
you're breaking the balance with the block. and you're not getting all of the randori that they do in judo and the pressure testing. Now, we did do that, but not to the same extent. But
Mm.
also the sparring in terms of, it's all well and good knowing how to throw and apply locks, but if you go, you take those techniques into a kickboxing class and somebody's just trying to take your head off, gloves on, these are untelegraphed strikes, you suddenly find that trying to use throws and locks when you can't even get close to these people without getting hit. And it's also about learning to get hit and move on, which if you're not used to that, that can be quite a difficult thing. So I was really missing the sparring element and the striking. And funnily enough, the striking always came more naturally to me than the jujitsu. Jujitsu, I
Mm.
had to work at. It was a lot of balance taking. You have to break your attacker's center. The same with judo. You have to
Mm.
get up, you lower your center of gravity. There's all these
Mm.
principles to go with it. So the striking always sort of came a little bit more naturally. But when I first started, you had your three options of judo, taekwondo, or karate. Those were the
Mhm.
only clubs. And because I was a martial arts nut, a bit of a nerd in terms of martial arts movies and things, I had some understanding. I'd already done a bit of karate, so I had some idea. And like you said, they're great arts, but there's something not quite
Mhm.
there for me personally.
Mhm.
I went along, this jujitsu class opened. I went along and they did a demonstration at the end of the class, and watching these, black belts throwing each other to the ground. Someone will come in with an attack and the other guy would put them on the floor. And it was like watching a movie, it was like
Mhm.
watching the Bourne films or something. And,
Mhm.
and my jaw probably hit the floor. And again, like you, I thought this is it. This is brilliant. It
Yeah.
looks realistic. The body mechanics are all there. It looks effective. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, later on, you start to realize that actually what's happening is somebody's putting in 100% of their attack. They're giving all of their momentum, all of their balance.
Right.
The other person's putting them on the floor. They know how to break fall. So you understand later on there's a little bit of compliance in there, and this is
Yeah.
one of the issues really with what I do and why I started doing other things, because to add in those elements of realism. But for me, I was hooked at that point, and the principles that jujitsu's given me in terms of taking balance, in terms of being relaxed in groundwork, whether you're underneath or on top, it's important to be relaxed because of how tired you get very quickly. All these things, I've been able to apply and use when I've gone away and looked at other martial arts. As
Mm.
you would know, you take what's useful, right, and discard what's not.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was me hooked on jujitsu. And when the John Wick films came out, man, did we have a field day with those, because that is pretty much what we do. It's all the judo throws, it's
Mhm.
the ridge hand strikes, all those
Mhm.
things, the chokes, the strangles. John Wick is probably the closest thing to our style put on screen. So we had a field day with those movies when they
Oh,
came out.
wow. Very cool. And you're still practicing today. You're still in classes.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I recently found out I've got a genetic defect, and I've got some issues with my heart, and
Mm.
I'm actually on a waiting list to have a permanent defibrillator permanently fitted into my chest,
Oh, wow.
which I think is going to make me a terrific Bond villain, because that's definitely some sort of weird quirk. So unfortunately, I can't do intense exercise. So
Um,
I've had to kind of James Bond it and adapt my exercise now, because I can't do sort of high intensity. I can't do too much running. I have to keep my heart rate low. Um, so I've taken a sort of a step back for the moment. So when you invited me on, it's been wonderful, because I could put my martial arts hat back on and really
mhm.
get back into that way of thinking.
Mhm.
But I'm still keeping up with what I do. All my best friends are the guys that ran the club and that I train with and teach with. And I'm teaching my son, so I'm still keeping up sort of daily
So you
practice,
still
using
practice something.
still practice, still using movement, all those things. Unfortunately I've had to step away from the class work a little bit,
Mm.
um, but absolutely still 100% in it. And my son's he was doing kickboxing from the age of 3.
Mm.
Now all he wants to do is play football. But I'm teaching him, regularly. So we're covering all the bases, groundwork, striking, all those things.
Brilliant.
But yeah, it's you were talking about what martial arts has given you in one of your videos, and you know, I've
That
got
was
to
my
echo
next
it.
question to you. What has it given
Oh,
you?
brilliant, brilliant. Well, I think I said to you on an email, when you not everyone works a job they love. I'm sure plenty of your viewers will know what I'm talking about. I've got a pretty standard office job. Doesn't give me a lot of satisfaction in my life, I have to say. What martial arts has given me is a sense of achievement, a sense of meaning outside of my 9 to 5. Um, you know, there's a progression, as you all know. You're learning. It's different to going to the gym, and I know some people obviously get a lot out of that. But I feel like with martial arts, you're learning. You're learning to control your body in ways that you don't do outside. Um, so it's given me a lot. And then because our club is a non-profit club, is a non-profit organization, my instructors did that, for free as volunteers. So
Wow.
when I started to teach, I could then give back also as a volunteer, and you're seeing people progress and learn skills for life.
Mm.
Um, so I have to echo what you were saying before. Absolutely, it just gives so much, and I don't think there's much to lose really. But I think it's so easy for people to talk themselves out of it. There'll be
Mm.
people listening to this thinking, "Yeah, I'd love to go and start a martial art," but I think it's very easy for people to talk themselves out of it. Um, and I say to those people, honestly, what's the worst thing that's going to happen if you turn up to a club? If you don't
Yeah.
like it, you just leave. But
Yeah.
what's the best thing that can happen?
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
my best friends, the people I still talk to now, are not from my school, secondary school, or anything like that. They're the guys I train with. They're the guys I teach with. Friends for life,
Right.
from martial arts. So
Right.
there's just so much to gain.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to ask you is, has any of the philosophy of martial arts creeped into your life? How's that? Have you gained anything from a philosophical point in terms of your outlook on your daily life, or how it's helped
Good
you
good
day to day?
question. I mean, this might not be quite what you expect, but I've sort of struggled on and off with it a little bit, because I find that you can't solve all your problems with martial arts. I don't know if you if you know what I mean by that. If you
Well, you can't solve all your problems with fighting, but there are
have,
definitely philosophical principles that have nothing to do with fighting that
yes,
support martial arts that can help. I mean,
absolutely,
it's helped me in my daily life, definitely.
absolutely. So let's see if I can articulate this in a way that makes sense. So I mentioned I've been teaching my son martial arts, and when you look at a lot of kids martial arts classes, they teach you confidence, but I wonder whether that confidence in yourself and that kind of sense of justice and right and wrong, whether that can get you into trouble at times. And I wonder whether, if I give my son the skills to defend himself, will that will is there a danger that make it more likely that he will stand his ground and get into a confrontation, or something will happen because of that? So I kind of, and as you know, when you learn martial arts, you tend not to get into fights. You tend not to have any issues.
I haven't
So
had a real fight since I started martial arts. That was,
absolutely, absolutely. So sometimes I wonder, am I doing the right thing by pushing him down that path? Personally, I think that the positives outweigh the negatives. Um, but I found myself, so I had some trouble. I live in a block of flats, and after COVID, I had some issues with some antisocial behaviour. There were some unsavoury people in the block, and I think because I felt like a fairly confident person, I was able to look after myself. I felt it was the right thing to do to speak out about these people and what they were doing. And I don't know whether martial arts has anything to do with that, but because I felt like I could look after myself and I wasn't going to be pushed around by other people, I decided to speak out. And what happened was I ended up with a target on my back because of that. And it was post COVID, so I was working from home. I had this stuff really on my doorstep. And if you'll bear with me, I'll get to some James Bond stuff in a minute. But it was a very stressful situation. And although I wasn't afraid of the people in the block, what I was afraid of was the people they were connected to, the people I don't know. I could leave my flat and somebody could walk up behind me and stick a knife in my back. I had my car smashed in by people that were unrelated. I didn't know who they were. So it was a highly stressful time. And I was stuck in my flat. Um, the idea of going out, having to do the school run, collect my son, bring my young son back here. I was getting back into the car park, checking around me. So, despite the martial arts background, I wonder whether did I open myself up to that? Did I put a target on my own back because of a bit of confidence there? I don't know. I
Hmm.
don't know. But at the time, as I say, it was highly stressful. Um, it was kind of like the adrenaline fight or flight all the time because it was really on my doorstep. But at the time, I was reading From Russia with Love, and uh, that made me think about the case. Obviously, the case that he gets at the start of the movie. Um, so I had this kind of idea. Well, what can I use? What are real life 007 gadgets that I can use or that I can carry with me that are going to help me feel more confident going out, coming back. Um, so really, it was like a James Bond proactive approach. Whereas I've been dealing with this kind of heightened state of fight or flight all the time, this allowed me to kind of look at, okay, well, what can I do? What things can I do? For example, like a personal alarm. So I've got a personal alarm which I carry around with me now. And again, another thing about ego, right? A lot of people who do martial arts might say, I don't need a personal alarm. I can deal with any situation. I'm trained to deal with any situation. And one of the philosophies and one of the big learnings for me from doing martial arts is realizing just how vulnerable you are. That's what martial arts should teach you, how vulnerable you are. And you should make sensible decisions. And you should remove, a lot of crime are crimes of opportunity. And you should do what you can to remove those opportunities. So, a personal alarm, what that means to me is either I can pull the cord, it makes a very loud noise, I can use it as a deterrent, shove it in someone's face, buy me some time to get away. Alternatively, if I get stabbed and I'm laying in a pool of my own blood and I can't call out, I've got a personal alarm that I can use to draw attention. And it kind of harks back to Casino when M says to him about removing his ego. And I know it's a different context, but for me, I think the biggest learning from martial arts is just how vulnerable you are. And self defense isn't about the techniques or the fighting, it's about all the stuff beforehand, de escalation, all the things they talk about, being aware of your surroundings, all those things. So when you ask about philosophy, I think the biggest thing for me is it's taught me how vulnerable you are. And yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest eye opening things for me.
Yeah, I know, because one of the things that my Sifu would also teach us is, it's as much about how not to fight it as it is about how to fight. It's about how to avoid those situations, how to have a gain an awareness where if you know where there's going to be trouble, go, turn left, go get away from that area. Have your eyes, ears, and senses open enough so you can sense something dangerous and happen. And it happened to me at least two or three times where I saw a stressful or a possible dangerous situation, and I just went the other way and avoided what might have been. There was a thing called brown belt syndrome, where you know enough where you know that you can fight, but you don't know enough to how to avoid a fight. And so a lot of brown belts got in trouble.
Yeah, yeah,
Where black belts would never be nowhere near that area or in anywhere near a situation like that. They know it. They're smart enough to like, nah, I'm getting out of here.
exactly. And you
So
mentioned in one of your other videos about a time when somebody was following you and
yeah,
you turned
that's
and
one of them.
confronted them.
Yeah,
And again, this is what I mean about crime being a crime of opportunity. And
yeah,
because you showed this guy that actually you were there to stand your ground,
yeah,
he quickly disappeared. He wasn't interested.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and
Because
and
most of them, they don't want a confrontation. They want to, you
they
know,
want an easy.
yeah, they want to sneak and grab and snatch and run. They don't want to get into a thing. And just me saying, "Oh, I know you're there," was enough for him to go, you
Sure.
know,
And this is
he didn't know
another
if I
thing.
knew anything or didn't.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
just knew that I knew that he was trying to do something, you know.
absolutely. And another thing I do is I always use the lock inside my car. So if I'm out and about in the car, I
Yeah,
lock the car from the inside
yeah,
because
me too.
somebody can just walk up to the door, open the door at the
Yeah,
lights, or quite recently where I am, somebody got boxed in by two cars.
yeah,
Um, and I've tried to make it a habit of every time I go out, I lock the car from the inside.
yeah,
And the other reason for that is if somebody pulls the door open, I'm in the
yeah,
worst position to try and fight. I'm seatbelted
absolutely.
in, sat
Yeah,
down, you know.
yeah.
So again, and people listen to that and they'll say, well, I can deal with, if something happens, I will deal with it. And
You have
this is
no
the thing,
idea.
and this is the thing. But for me, I just want to. It's not paranoia. It's not fear. I want to
Yeah,
remove that opportunity. You know.
exactly. It's
But
smarts. It's intelligence,
and
you
that
know.
I'm not sure that all martial arts instructors pass that on. Um,
Good
you know.
ones do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Good ones do.
But
My
I think.
teacher definitely did. His teacher definitely did. It's definitely something that was passed down. My teachers, my Qigong, my teacher's teacher, he grew up in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s New York City Chinatown. He was in he was in fights with gangsters, so he knew what you know uh, fighting for your life really was. So, and he instilled into his students and then his students into us, a morsel of some of those lessons. So it's very important. Again, it's important to have that to what all martial arts do, and I don't care what it is, they will heighten your awareness. They will make you more aware of your surroundings and what's going on and have a sense of if trouble is going to happen or not. And that's one thing that I think all martial arts are very, very valuable for. Again, it's as much about learning how not to fight as it is learning if you're forced to fight, if you have
Mm.
no choice. So that's invaluable. So I think that goes into what I was going to say. What do you think the martial arts will help others? And I think we're talking about that right now.
Where do you start? I mean, confidence, longevity, just the health benefits that
Hmm.
So a lot of issues. I mean, you will have heard, as people get older, mobility issues with balance.
Hmm.
Um, how much it shortens your life if you have a fall when you're older. And
Hmm.
one thing that martial arts gives you is balance, control over your body.
Hmm.
If you can stand on one foot and hook kick someone, and
Hmm.
you're going to pinpoint, I'm going to hook kick them in the eyebrow. If you've got that level of control over your own body, that in itself is a huge benefit. As
Hmm.
you've touched upon, the spiritual side of it. So a lot of martial arts have their katas or forms. A lot of them have different versions of that. But for
Hmm.
me, that's almost meditation in movement. Meditation in,
Well,
in
that's
motion.
exactly what it is. Yeah.
So there's so many things to be gained. For me personally, obviously, what got me into it was the self defense aspects. So any martial art you do will give you some element of self defense as well.
Hmm.
Um, for me, as you said, the good instructors will also give you those other tools. I think one thing that I learned very early on, and our club was doing some stewarding for a local boxing event, and
Hmm.
I was outside directing cars, which was a very important job. And some guy came up to me, and he actually came right up to me, but his hands were low. His hands were low at his hips, so he wasn't being aggressive, but he came right up into my personal space. Now,
Hmm.
most traditional styles, and mine in particular, when you're training, you start off in a stance, your partner starts in a stance. Right, we both know we're ready. They step and attack. I do
Hmm.
my block. I do my technique.
Hmm.
Um, and it's all muscle memory. You've got this misconception that if something happens, it's all going to just kick in, and you're just gonna go Jackie Chan on these people. And actually, what happened was this guy came up into my personal space. His hands were down, very passive, but clearly something was going to happen. He was trying to do something.
Right.
Now, in that particular event, I kind of he said something about, "Are you security?" And I said, "No, no, I'm just working the car park," and just sort of tried to play it down. A car
Hmm.
came in. I sort of sided off the car and had a conversation, and the guy just walked off. But when I was thinking back afterwards, it was like this massive light bulb moment of, my training hasn't prepared me for this situation. You
Mm.
know, when you're learning self defense, generally you're learning that somebody's going to attack you. You're getting
Hmm.
hit first, so you're almost trained to wait for that hit, wait for that
Right.
attack.
Right.
Not
Right.
many. A lot of arts will talk about striking first,
Yeah.
but most people that are learning self defense are good people that aren't going to punch first.
No.
You're almost trained to wait for that attack. But
Yeah.
also it was
Definitely.
the personal space thing, right? So if I was so vulnerable at that moment, so vulnerable. If he'd
Hmm.
have thrown an elbow, a knee, any kind of sneaky punch, I would have been
Hmm.
on the back foot straight away because of the personal
Hmm.
space. And there's a lot of techniques out there. There's something called the fence, which you hear quite a lot. But
Hmm.
essentially, it's just having your hands up, palms out, and this is something I've learned and start to use a lot because
Hmm.
it's the same as a normal stance, but by
Hmm.
having your palms out, it looks very passive. It tells
Hmm.
it tells people around you and CCTV, I don't want to
Hmm.
fight, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Yeah.
just as good as having your hands
Oh
up in a
yeah.
stance,
Yeah.
any stance.
It's something they teach in women's self-defense. It's something that I've taught to women for when I've taught women self-defense as well. So yeah,
Yeah, but
having
by
that
having
sort
it,
of like easy, easy.
sure,
But
exactly.
if you notice, this is a defensive posture. I got the hand out. I got this hand by the elbow. My gates are closed. Even though it looks like a very passive, take it easy. I have first gate, second gate, and the gates are closed. So if anything could happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the whole thing. It gives you
Yeah,
time to react. If your
yeah,
hands aren't there,
yeah,
and somebody, and more often than not in street fights, you see people squaring up, this macho thing. And it's
yeah,
very
yeah, yeah, yeah,
tempting. It's very tempting to do the same back. Well,
yeah, yeah,
actually,
yeah,
that's the worst thing you can do because you're so vulnerable in that position.
yeah, yeah,
That
definitely.
those hands just give you the time. But if you don't train that, if you don't practice
Yeah,
that, it
yeah,
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter
yeah,
what you know. It doesn't matter what you know because you may never get to use
no,
any of those techniques
no,
if they get the first punch. And if they get a
right.
clean punch and knock you out or
Yeah,
whatever, it doesn't matter what you know. So
yeah,
I think a lot of traditional martial arts are missing that sort of fence work, the covering, just basic covering techniques, just in case if it is very close up.
yeah,
Um, so for me, it was a big realization, especially around that personal space thing,
yeah,
what to do in that situation. Because if
yeah,
you don't train that way, so
yeah.
again, that was another big learning for me, and another reason why I started to go off and do cross training and other things as well.
Mm, very
I'm not
good,
sure
very
what the
good.
question was, but we've probably done another 45
It
minutes.
was about it was about what other people could what do you think other people could learn and what do you think other people could gain from it and
Yeah. So I
you
think
know
there's a huge amount to gain, but
Yeah.
be aware of the gaps in the style, be aware of those self-defense things, because
Yeah. Yeah.
some instructors don't seem to be aware of their own gaps in their own styles. So, just be aware of these things, because for me, the self-defense is before the technique. The self-defense is not getting hit at the beginning. That's the self-defense
Right.
part. You know? So
Yeah. I mean, yeah, real self-defense is, again, like we said before, not getting into those situations and
yeah,
learning how
sure.
to diffuse those situations if they begin to. And there's a few times, again, even maybe a couple of years ago, where I got into altercations where things looked like they could go south real fast. And I was able to just calm things down and try to talk to the other person and avoid any physical confrontation before it even began. And I probably could only do that because of my martial art training, that I was able to be confident enough and calm enough and able to calm the other guy down, in a situation, where things, if I was standing my ground and he was standing his ground, and I don't own that. I always tell my students, you don't own that ground. Why are you standing that ground? Why do you need to defend that ground? You don't own it. Just do whatever you
Absolutely.
can to calm the situation, to relax the situation, to not let it escalate out of control.
That
That's the highest martial art.
that's a really good
Yeah.
point, actually, and it just reminded me about, so in a real situation, obviously the adrenaline you get and the
Oh yeah.
fear, shaking hands, and the
Oh
only
yeah.
way really to try and counter that is through training and practice. And
The training and
you know
practice. Yeah. And my training and practice, when I get into these situations, and they're very rare. I think maybe two or three in the past decade,
so
even
David
or
David
past
Zaritsky,
two
is it?
decades. Yeah.
David kicking off, is it?
What?
David Zaritsky kicking off, is it?
What, him? What do you
those,
mean?
those those situations. Is it David?
No.
Did he get the nunchucks out?
Oh yeah, yeah, with the nunchuck date. No, David's awesome. I love that guy. No, I'm just saying that my training, since a lot of part of it was meditation and calming down, I was so calm in that situation. I was so relaxed that it diffused it before it even began. You
Mm,
know, he was like freaking out.
mm,
I was not. The more he freaked out, the calmer I got. The calmer I got, all of a sudden he could see, oh, there's nothing to defend here,
mm,
and that calmed him down. But if I didn't know what I knew, I would probably be really nervous and scared or thing, and I'd be like, I'd
kind
be
of escalated.
starting to instigate something too, because I had something to defend, and I'm like, no, so yeah, so that the training in and itself
Mm,
can you don't even, like I said, we martial artists, since we've learned a martial art, we really never had to fight,
mm, yeah,
and it's because of that. So anyway,
and
all
it's
right,
the
so I'm
same
gonna,
with.
what? Go
I was
ahead.
going to say it's the same with the groundwork and the sparring. You're learning to just breathe through it and
Oh,
stay calm all the time. And
it's all
so
martial
sorry.
art.
Yeah, yeah,
Groundwork, stand-up work, kickboxing, whatever it is. It
sure.
doesn't matter. I tell people it doesn't matter what martial art, find something that you love, find something that works for you. To go back to the style guys, it's like a suit. I always say martial arts like a suit. Find something that fits you. And if it fits, keep going with it. And if it doesn't, try another suit, try another martial art. It doesn't matter. You're doing several. You've done several. I mean, I stuck with one. That's one way of doing it, and or you can do several and combine them. That's another way of doing it. Both are equally valid ways of doing martial arts. It doesn't matter. But like I said, this has been such a pleasure. I want everybody right now, if you're listening to this, go to the 007 GB website, look at the article. Again, it's The Fighting Styles of Fleming's Bond, right? Okay. The Fighting Style of Fleming's Bond. Excellent article to understand where the book James Bond got his martial arts and got his martial art style and got his martial arts training. It is a brilliant article. I am so appreciative that you were able to talk to me today. And I'm really appreciative that you wrote that article, if not a little jealous that I didn't do it myself. So thank
As I
you. Thank
say,
you. Yeah, thanks
as
so
I, as I
much, John.
Yeah, yeah, and I was, inspired, equally inspired by your own article to write that, and it's just great to meet somebody else that loves martial arts and James Bond with equal measure. So, but thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yeah.
And again, like I said earlier, it's been so nice to put the martial arts hat on, and
Mhm.
so
It's
thank you so
hey,
much.
it's part of the James Bond lifestyle. It's just not a part that gets highlighted, and I want to build this community of the people in the other James Bond lifestyle, the martial arts, some of the action stuff, some of the more adventurous stuff. Again, I wish I had the knowledge of the fashion. That's what they're for. And they're great at it. And
Yeah,
trust me,
yeah.
you don't want to take fashion advice from me. I don't know, it's a big mistake. There are very good experts out there. Okay,
No, not at all.
okay, John.
You're a very stylish guy.
Thank you very much. Not my doing. I wish I could take credit for it. It's more of the Zaritskis and the Matt Spazers that contributed to that. But anyway, thank you guys. Thank you so much, John. And again, go to that article, look it up. And then you also have an Instagram. You're back on Instagram. What's the Instagram?
Back on Instagram. I've got a Kofi page which kind of gives out most of my information. So Kofi, they just search Kofi John Abel. They should be able to find me. I've got a few podcasts and things on there.
Okay, very good. Excellent. And I'll put that information underneath. And you'll see all his contacts as well. All right, thanks a lot. And we'll
Thank you.
see you next time with another martial artist. Okay.